all over the Metroplex. So if you want to help us, please send us an email. We're more than happy to have you.
Sorry, I was multitasking.
That's okay. We also, if you're a member and you don't have a name badge, we can order those and get them pretty quickly. Please sign up. Talk to Lois.
Yeah, just on the sign sheet, just come check by your name. It says you need one, and I can issue it on next meeting. So I can get them 2 days. But just let me know. And if you lost one,
We can't hear you, Lois.
and if you lost one, which I forgot to give to someone, I will be glad to get new ones for those who may have lost.
Yes. If you need a new name badge or if you've lost your old name badge, we're more than happy to get you another one. Just send us an email or indicate that on the sign-in sheet. There is a space for it, so just put a check mark. You can do that at any point today. Or if you're online, please send us an email. We will get those to you. Yard signs are coming up. I know last year those were a hit. We have ordered some more, so if you didn't get last year, they will be available. I think we'll get them in time for our NLCP class, which is April 20th. So it's the level 1 class. If you haven't signed up for it, please do. It's a 2-day class. Saturday is the online Zoom instructional portion. So there's several presentations all online on Zoom. And then the second day, Sunday, is a plant walk, where you actually go and see the plants in person and get to familiarize yourself with those new plants. So please sign up. The link is available online on the website. I think there's still space, isn't there, Janet?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so there's still space.
Yeah, because we can take a big number.
Okay, yes, please sign up. There's plenty of room. And we will have the biodiversity, the Grow Native Plant yard sign available at the NLCP class, and also at our the Native Plants and Prairies Day. There's a plant sale, so we will have signs available then. So, please come out. Okay. Those are all the announcements I have. I know that this works.
It works.
Not working because I brought one with me.
Oh, you did?
It's working when I don't touch the mouse.
Okay, let me try. Oh, okay, yes, so it does work. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I think that's it.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Do you want to?
I'll do the introduction. All right, thank you all for being here. Today's guest, we have Adam Black. Thank you for making it all the way out here. Let me get to his bio. So if you don't know him, Adam Black is currently the Director of Horticulture and Plant Conservation at Bartlett Tree Research Laboratories and Arboretum in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's a former Texas resident, remains very active with the collaborative ex situ conservation of the state's many imperiled plant species. In addition to extensive familiarity of the southern U.S. flora, he has been involved in fieldwork and plant explorations in New Caledonia, Taiwan, the Philippines, South Africa, and beyond. So please give us a warm welcome for Adam Black.
Thank you. Everybody hear me if I talk up this volume here?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, the title here kind of speaks for itself. I mean, we all are plant nerds here, I hope, and hopefully this doesn't really apply to you all, but maybe it does. I mean, we all gravitate towards the cool stuff, the flashy stuff, the orchids and the big flowers and things like that. But there's so much that just really goes just totally neglected. I'm guilty of it too, and I'm trying to get out of that as well as I go here. Things I'm not even going to get into, like things like carex, the sedges. I love them, but I let other people handle those. I have friends who are working on the monograph of the genus carex right now, so hopefully we'll have a better resource here soon. But yeah, I work for, well, I'm from Texas. Some of you might know me from when I was at the John Ferry Garden, better known by its old name, Peckerwood Garden. Either a good or a bad name, depending on how you look at it. But this was basically the former garden of John Ferry and all his amazing collections with Carl Schoenfeld from northern Mexico, as well as a lot of native Texas plants too. John passed away several years ago, and the garden was renamed in his honor. It's an amazing collection there. But after I left there, I was working here in Texas, just doing botanical and horticultural consulting just on my own, and collecting a lot of things, sharing things with botanic gardens around the country and around the world, actually. And one of the places I always shared with was Bartlett Research Laboratories in Charlotte. It's most of you probably recognize Bartlett Tree Experts. They're basically in every major city around the country. We're also in Canada and the UK. And basically the president of Bartlett, Robert Bartlett, is just a total plant nerd. And in addition to the arboricultural research that we do on the property here, of which we do a lot, you can see our motto, Scientific Tree Care since 1907. We're the oldest tree company chain that there is out there. He just wanted to start a collection of just anything that could be grown. They started a arboretum up in Stamford, Connecticut, where our home office is, and then realized that was too limiting. So they purchased property in Charlotte, where we can kind of push limits on southerly things and northerly things, and it allows us to just grow an amazing diversity of plants there. Now we have an arboretum in Oregon, so we can grow all that stuff we can't grow in the East, and we now have an arboretum in the UK, so I'll be helping with grow those as well. We're not open to the public. We do try to cater to plant geeks, so if any of you who are in the area, we'll try to fit you in. It's one of the best collections of plants probably in North America that nobody knows about in terms of diversity. We're right around 30,000 living collections, and that's not even going to count the stuff that we killed trialing. So that's part of the fun too, is figuring out what's going to survive and what's not. But yeah, I've got a good gig where they just pay me to travel around the world collecting plants. And when I took the job, I said, I'll take it if I can still keep going back to Texas, because I love it here. There's so much to do in terms of plant conservation. There's a lot of good institutions here that are working on it. Of course, Britt and Lady Bird Johnson, San Antonio Botanic Garden, Mercer, and other places. And I'm glad to see that there's energy behind the Texas Plant Conservation Alliance now, which is hopefully going to be unifying those efforts here. And because I think things in the past have been a little, unfortunately, competitive, and certain gardens wouldn't work on this and that, and not liking people on their turf, unfortunately. It seems to be a thing in conservation, which is, it should not be that way. We should all be working together. We all have things we can bring to the table here for the greater good. So many of you all know this, but conservation, it means different things to different people. And from my standpoint, I do a lot of ex situ conservation, taking things from their habitat ethically and growing them outside of their habitat, either in cultivation somewhere. Not necessarily in Texas. We're finding that some of these things, especially some of the relic species that are in West Texas and the little moist canyons out there, actually do better when you take them further east. There's, I'll go over some examples of that in a second. So there is a benefit to actually taking them outside the state lines. A lot of people freak out when they hear that, but there are ethical ways of doing that. In situ conservation is, of course, the best way to go, preserving the habitat where everything is there, where it can be interacting with all the other constituents there, both plants and animals, that require those neighbors. But that's not always the case, of course. And it's good to see that folks like the Native Plant Rescue Project down in Wilco County is really taking off. I hope that, I know there's plans for that to spread through all the other NPSOT chapters, and hopefully you guys are on board with that and working towards that, because it was a real eye-opener for me to go to North Carolina, I will say, just because here you can still find so much stuff. North Carolina, it's been tilled for so long that there's just nothing until you get up in the mountains, or maybe just some of those last remaining tracks in the coastal plain. I mean, you just drive along and it is just a dead zone all along. There's no such thing as a prairie remnant, even though most of that used to be prairie there. It used to be all Piedmont prairie and that kind of central zone between the coastal plain and the mountains there. And there's like think the estimates are like 98% of it are just totally gone, and even that 2% that's left, it's just not what it once was. And so and everybody keeps it a wasteland because they're just broadcasting herbicide along the road just constantly. We complain about the mowing here, but really the mowing is doing good for these plants here as long as it's timed properly, which you can't unfortunately time it for everything, but that's basically taking the place of all the fire and everything it used to suppress all that competing vegetation. I hear too many people cursing the mowing, but it really is necessary. So otherwise, just try to get going with some of the plants, but obviously seed banking, preservation of tissue samples, which isn't really living material, but we at least have that DNA preserved as well if any researchers want to be working on that. So that is something we do too, is we will collect genetic material and get it preserved in either silica dried or in liquid nitrogen, and just we're constantly banking all these things. They got biorepositories at Brit, that's where a lot of my stuff is gone, as well as other folks. And yeah, I'm a big fan of conservation through being in the hands of y'all, just being able to grow things. A lot of people don't like the thought of that, especially rare plants. There's some people that just, unfortunately, have this philosophy that really you have to keep rare plants rare. It shouldn't be in the hands of private citizens, because if you plant it somewhere else, it's just gonna hybridize with some other relative and wherever you're trying to grow it, and the world's gonna end, which, yeah, in some cases, they can hybridize with some of your local relatives, but it's not a black and white issue where you just don't do it here. I've seen so many botanic garden conservation programs just go by the wayside, and what were just wonderful programs just totally go away. I hate to see that happen to someone like Brett or Lady Bird or San Antonio or any of these other movers and shakers, but it does happen, trust me. And it's a good thing when these things do get in the hands of private individuals, because they do care and they will keep track of it. So getting it out there as much as possible is critical. There we go. So starting off with an oak, I love oaks. Doing a lot of oak work out in West Texas. And this one always fascinated me, even though it's basically that little pathetic looking woody plant, but it occurs in Mexico, but in the US, there's only this one population on top of Mount Livermore. I don't know if you've ever been to the Davis Mountain Preserve and climbed to the top Baldy Peak there. There's basically, we've counted 8 individuals up there, just in that one little area before you climb up to the very top of Baldy Peak there. And they're all mixed in with the common gray oak, Cricus grisea. So it's hard to kind of tell them apart, but I think there's been a lot of misidentifications. The last numbers up there were, during a survey a long time ago, was I think 18, but they're definitely not 18 here. One of them is growing right in the middle of the, if you've ever been up there, it's like a fire road going almost to the top there. One of them is growing right in the middle of the fire road, and people are just stepping on it when you're going up there, and they hack it back with machetes every so often. And I finally told them that just leave it. You can easily walk around it here. And they just didn't know what they had, because it was just some scrubby oak just coming up here, and it was just in the way to them. I will say, though, that when they would hack it back, it would make nice, vigorous resprouts. It was great for our propagation now. And like this individual here, it is a suckering species normally, but this one was always trying to sucker, so we had to finally graft this one last year. But now we have every single individual backed up in cultivation of this population. And so that's what it looks like in the dry years, even worse, because of course we get these droughts. Some years they just don't get any rain at all out in West Texas, or nothing that's going to be significant enough to make these plants produce any foliage. So they just basically go dormant, drop all their leaves, and that's what they look like when they get a nice monsoon year. They actually do flush out again. I mean, underneath there, it's still all just a disheveled skeleton of sticks in there, but they can look beautiful. And so this is one of those examples, as I was saying earlier, it's a relic species that's growing at the very top of that highest peak there. It can't go any higher. So basically, as conditions warm, it just can't go any further. So it was probably just going to disappear. Again, we have it in Mexico too, but these populations are important too.
So would you put that in a private collection somewhere, say the bush or somewhere like that, or would you just leave it there?
Well, as I said, we've backed all the population, all the individuals at the site here through grafting or from vegetatively through root suckers. And we're getting them backed up first and foremost in botanic gardens that have a conservation program that are going to care about them long term. But eventually, yeah, I mean, that's a plan. We want to keep repropagating these and getting them out there. It's going to be a slow process, though. So
is this an evergreen oak?
if it doesn't go through a horrible drought like I showed, it would normally be holding its leaves year round. We left ours outdoors in North Carolina, and we've been down to, I think our lowest temperature is 8 this year so far, and they're not skipping a beat. So cold is no problem, but just the availability of water seems to be the problem. Oh, I meant to say, so looking that way, you can see that rock back up in there. Walking over there, we find Arenaria livermorensis, which only lives on that rock, nowhere else in the world. Well, it's actually a ridge that wraps around, so it's on that ridge, I should say, rather than that one rock. But that's basically what it looks like. That thing in the foreground just looks like a little clump of moss. Most people would walk right by it. And I remember, if any of you know John Cargis, he was with us when we were doing the Quercus depressipes work. When we were talking about this plant, I hadn't seen it yet. And he said, well, it just looks like someone just took a wad of grass and chewed it up for a long time and then just spit it on a rock. And so that kind of shows kind of the, I mean, he was joking, of course. He's a conservation-oriented individual, but to some people, that's all it would look like to them. Nothing important there, even though this is the only place in the world it grows. And so this was taken during that droughty time when that Quercus depressipes I showed you earlier was all browned up, so a lot of it had died back. But I came back in the rainy year when that last nice, lush-looking photo of the oak was, and there's that same plant right there. It just sprouted right back, looks a lot more luxuriant. So I'll have these maps from Bonap here just showing the ranges. Basically where the colored yellow is on this, that's basically a county record. So the county is shaded in, it's not found in that entire extensive area of Jeff Davis County there. That just means that records, herbarium records are from those counties.
But who pollinates?
Good question, I'm not sure actually. I'm not good with knowing who pollinates who in all cases. There's all the obvious examples, and I should know, but I will have to look that up now. And when you said you don't follow me on Facebook, that's always your question whenever I'm posting something, is who pollinates it? Just to refresh your memory. Yeah. But yeah, that's how big it is. I mean, with the advent of alpine gardening and crevice gardening, different forms of rock gardening. I showed these same slides to North American Rock Garden Society meeting I did last weekend, and everybody got all excited, like, I want to grow that, which I thought was great. I mean, if botanic gardens don't want to do this, we can get this in the hands of private individuals. I mean, some botanic gardens will grow it. Denver Botanic Garden definitely wants it. Because that's basically what they're known for, is their alpine and rock garden plants there. So something we're hoping to work on here in the near future, hopefully collaboratively, again, not just us taking it. So many of you know, Texas and other states have their species of greatest conservation need, which is great, but it's the list can never be long enough. It's there's a lot that goes into making this list here, and there's a lot that really should be on this list that a lot of people agree are basically going extinct, and it's just something that is just in need of reassessment. So many of y'all can probably think of examples of this. this is one that came to mind when I was thinking of what a good example would be. It's probably not something most people would think of, but this willow, this photo was taken in Florida because it seems to not occur in Texas anymore, yet nobody seems to care. Has been considered Salix humilis in the past. We know now it's a different species. It's restricted mostly to the coastal plain of the southeastern U.S. So most of those records that you see there are all true Salix humilis. And then everything from the East Texas records wrap around through Louisiana, down to Florida, and all the way up through coastal Carolinas and even up into Maine is basically the Salix occidentalis is the new name for that particular thing. And I've tried to hunt down all those, you can see those records in Northeast Texas there. I've tried to hunt all those down, and those sites just do not exist anymore. There was all good site data for all those collections from back in the early to mid 1900s, and they're definitely not there. It's a habitat specialist, and so it's easy to basically just wipe off the face of our state here. You see a lot of records just over the line too, up in southeastern Oklahoma and northern Louisiana and Arkansas. It's most of those sites are gone too. I've gone looking for it up there, so don't let these maps fool you. These are just records over time. And so I've talked to folks in the conservation world here, especially with the state, and they're like, yeah, I mean, it is important, but it's more common in other states, therefore we just don't track it, which I get it. There's too many things for them to track, but
So when you, this would be because of construction, so this is where Dallas area is. So does anybody look at a construction site before it's just completely obliterated?
well, I mean, that's what the Native Plant Rescue Project
Yeah,
is doing
that's
down in
what
They
we're
do.
doing.
Wilco.
So do they let you on before you come in?
You have, it's a long process and it takes a lot of negotiation. And so you kind of have to scope it from the edges and then reach out to that developer and work with them to have them allow you on. And then
Okay.
you can, yeah.
I don't think they mind you taking it, but just probably letting you on. Okay.
Yeah, so it's yeah, I'm glad people are doing it, but it's not always a win when you do that. There's a lot of developers that just don't want you on their land, and I'm glad with what Ashley and the folks down there are doing, just because they've developed a lot of good relationships and playing their cards right, as opposed to villainizing developers. That's not the way to go. And there's a lot of people too out there that are just going and trespassing on sites and rescuing things, which, yeah, I get their, I'm glad they have the passion to do so, but it's also just making a bad name for all of us. So it would be really good, again, for all the NPSOT chapters to basically have a program in their area. And dare I say it, I mean, we can be supporting these developers that are allowing people to come on there. I mean, that's good promotion, that I think, even though we don't really ultimately like what they're doing. I mean, throw them a bone too. So yeah, even in Florida, it's practically gone. This is one of two remaining populations. I mean, that literally is one of the two populations. There's 8 individuals in there. It's basically sandwiched between a pine plantation and this mowed roadside here along the highway. Probably was more extensive at some point, but very specific, like I said earlier, where it wants to grow. It's kind of perched just above, it's what's called ecotonal. It's perched just above a wetland and a higher sandy dry zone there. So it likes it right in that little boundary line where its roots can be just above that water line, but not too dry either. So that's again why it's so easy for it to disappear. There's one in our arboretum from that same population when you let it actually grow, and that's it, flowering 2 weeks ago. Flowers very early. That's a male plant. So really beautiful one too. People should be growing it. It'd be great to rediscover some Texas material and get it propagated and growing.
What does it need to grow?
Hmm?
What does it need to grow?
In cultivation, it's very adaptable, even though it's very specific to where it wants to grow in the wild. I've grown it in my yard in Florida and just pure sand. Once it was established, I would just neglect my yard most of the time, and it was on its own. It did great. Most of these things, when they're very specific to a certain site, it's more for seed germination rather than necessarily the long-term health of the plant. So a lot of plants are adaptable. They're already established on a good root zone, as long as they're getting water and everything. So that one is, most willows are very adaptable as long as they don't dry out too bad. That is probably one of the more drought-tolerant willows, I would say. Hackberries or sugarberries, whatever common name you use for the Celtis. A lot of people don't like them, even though they're just extremely valuable for wildlife. Yeah, they make a pretty kind of ungainly tree that doesn't have a very good architecture. That's why I think a lot of people don't like them. They come up along fence rows and just other places you don't want them. But again, they produce a lot of fruit in the time of the year when wildlife needs it. And we have this very localized species that a lot of people don't know about down around San Antonio area. And then I found, I guess nobody was paying attention because I found a really nice population of it in Monument Hill State Park down near LaGrange, a little bit east of that area there. But it's very spotty otherwise. It's got much larger leaves than just our regular Celtis occidentalis or reticulata. It's got white hairs on the undersides of the leaves there. I couldn't find my good photos of it. And the bark's kind of interesting too. Once it gets large, it just peels off in really large flakes and always has kind of a winged appearance to it. I think it has even better just structure to it. It tends to form a little bit more straight leader than our other scrubby species. And yeah, that was the best photo I can take. This is when we were actually collecting seeds of it down in on the population in Uvalde County. And these are folks from UC Davis Arboretum. We're collecting down there, found a tree loaded with fruit, and they're growing it out there. But yeah, you can see it's just scattered county records there. Another thing nobody pays attention to, but we're hoping to do collections later this year with San Antonio Botanic Garden.
Could you speak up a little louder, please?
Sorry, maybe we should stand in the center here too a little bit. Brutally, I've heard some people call them paratile, but most people agree it's peridily. These are known as clip daisies because most species will grow on vertical surfaces, usually just out of cracks in rocks or pinholes in rock faces. But this particular one here actually grows on, I've only seen it growing on flat surfaces, but it's still, it's hard to see, but this is solid limestone here that it's growing on. Really nice compact little plant, very localized. I've only seen it at one site on private land near the Chinati Mountains. But when you start looking at it up close, it's got just these really, the dissectos from the really finely dissected fuzzy leaves on it. And these nice little flowers there. Another great, I think, rock garden plant that propagated very easily from cuttings. This was the one time I saw it in habitat. There weren't any. You tried to collect some of these seeds that were starting to look like they were maturing, but they never germinated, but the cuttings rooted readily. So we need to get more material of that and do some seed banking of this. The Electrum texanum, this has gotten a little bit of attention down in the College Station area and down the Brazos Valley from there. This is one of those things that nowadays is more common in cemeteries than any other habitat. And you might know cemeteries, especially the really old ones, actually are basically prairie remnants because people started dying from day one here and people needed to be buried somewhere. And so before they tilled the land, they had these remaining tracts of land with all sorts of good stuff on it. And so everything got cultivated around them, and other things tended to seeds tended to blow in from last remnants in these cemeteries here. So they're just a treasure trove in some cases when you can find a really good old cemetery. So I think the state had, last time I looked, it's been a few years, they had like less than 24 sites for this, and most of them were cemeteries. And I think a lot of that is just people not getting out and looking because nobody really cares about this little thing that's usually mixed in the grass. That's how it normally looks. All these little green splotches here are the Thalictrum, the meadow roof. And it's a winter grower, so a lot of botanists aren't out. It's flowering right now. I saw some this morning down near my house, down in Brazos County. And it emerges, so yeah, it emerges in November. It goes dormant by May or so. If not, sometimes it'll go dormant earlier if it's really dry spring. But yeah, it just looks like this little weedy thing just among the grass, so people just kind of ignore it unless you know what it is. Tauchia texana, also from that same region. It's common where you find it. You can sometimes find these little streams that are just carpeted with the plant, and all those little yellow flowers are it. But it's very hit or miss in terms of you can find similar streams all over the place that feed into the Brazos down there, and I'd say the vast majority don't have it, but then you'll suddenly find one little tributary that's loaded with it. This particular one was on private land of a board member from John Prairie Garden, who through eminent domain, they were going to be widening a farm to market road in front of his house and into a 4-lane highway down in Fort Bend County. And so they had supposedly done a botanical survey down there already and cleared it. And he wanted me to come out and look at it just to see if they wanted me to salvage anything. And it was just loaded with the Tauchia. It was loaded with, it was the first time I had seen this Thalictrum actually outside of a cemetery. I've seen it outside of the cemetery since then, but that was also growing along these banks here as well. And there were a couple other just new county records at this spot too. So I told Anna Strong about it, and nothing apparently was able to happen because it's now a 4-lane highway. But I did rescue a lot of those plants there, and they're doing great in North Carolina. It's the plants close up. It's a winter grower too. It comes up in November and goes dormant by late spring, kind of like the meadow I showed earlier. This isn't too rare here, and some of you may know it. This is another one of those plants that a lot of people go looking in cemeteries for. It's often considered to be the world's smallest angiosperm flowering plant, but it's not really the case. It's probably the smallest in North America, but there's definitely other plants of similar stature down in South America and other places. But it's called the petite plant or the little people, I think is one of the other common names for it. But it'll get slightly bigger than this. That is, you can see the flower in there. That's basically just a big green flower sticking up. These are on my property. I've got them all over the place. But this is kind of a reverse example. They're pretty common if you know where to look for them in Texas, in the eastern part of Texas. There's kind of the range. But you can see where I went in the Carolinas, there's it becomes rare. The yellow is basically means that the states track those plants wherever they have the yellow county records. Texas doesn't track it. It's in green there because it's common enough. But it basically hasn't been seen in the Carolinas, North or South Carolina, in quite some time. And nobody's really looking for it either because nobody cares. It's just a little tiny annual that grows in the wintertime. A few of us care. A few of us are looking. South Carolina state botanist is really interested, so he and I are kind of competitive. Who gets to find it first? We're always crawling around cemeteries looking. But, yeah, all the historic sites are just totally gone. Hopefully we will find it there, but another thing that was never even on my radar, I was familiar with this plant from Florida because it grows there. Then I learned it was in extreme South Texas, but then I was looking through herbarium records because I wanted to see it in South Texas just to compare it to the Florida individuals, and saw one of Jason Singer's collections from Wharton County, which was way north of where all the, you can see where the existing documentations are down in the very southern part of the state there. Wharton County is getting up a little more closer to Houston, up the coast there. And so I called him and he's like, oh yeah, he told me exactly where it was. It was just growing along this herbicided edge of a crop field, or a cultivated field there, between there and the mowed roadside there. So I went there and sure enough, everything was blasted with herbicide. These little plants were coming up in that one little zone there. They died down to like a little bulb, so I guess they just got knocked back with herbicide and just resprout again. So that's basically the northern record, but these look quite different than the South Texas things. So I think these things need to be looked at in terms of whether or not these are a new species. So I made collections of these. I collected seed. It's basically a relative of Ruellia. And those of you that have grown Ruellia know that they turn into a weed. These seeds germinated 100%, so it's a easy grower. I don't know why it's not more common, but in cultivation, it was pretty easy to get going here. So I've been meaning to get down to that population and see if they're still there. Another thing, I love this plant, but I think it's very overlooked in the state. Micranthes texana. Don't let all the records fool you in Texas. Most of those are gone. There's a lot of herbarium records down around the again College Station area where I was living. I tried tracking every single one of those down that had good, precise localities, and they're all just built up. There was one cemetery site near me, and I kept visiting every year, just scouring that cemetery. And that was a record from 2016, and I still could not find it. And finally, last year, suddenly, they just appeared 4 plants. That was it, in that one little cemetery. So it may just be dependent on the year, or I just totally overlooked them because they're pretty cryptic. But yeah, most of these sites in Texas are gone. I don't know if anybody's seen it up in this part of the state here. It does occur here, but at least like looking at iNaturalist, there's like nothing from up there. Most of the records are from, there's one bear in Newton County there that is kind of a stronghold for them, and then there's just a couple other observations in Walker County near Huntsville on a private land. So just one to keep your eye out for. And this is also, just something to look in cemeteries for. It would be flowering right now. It's an early flowering thing. So again, I think a lot of people miss it too, because not many people are going out as intensively looking for things as they are later in spring. Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's not like that tall at the most. But really beautiful flowers when you look at it up close. And we're back to Ruellia. I think Ruellia probably gets, at least the more rare species just get overlooked just because it looks like a Ruellia. There's tons of them that have that general look, but this particular one is only found in a couple counties in kind of the southwestern Edwards Plateau, right along the edge of it. These are actually in Uvalde County, which isn't reflected there yet. We have herbarium specimens at UT, so eventually that'll get updated on the Bonet maps. But this was, I thought, a really beautiful plant. The nice broad leaves, which tend to be a lot more distinctive than some of the other species that are either in this area or elsewhere in the state. And when we found these, they were just totally just dried up, and there was enough material there for diagnostic purposes. George Atskovich from UT was with us, and so he took them back to the herbarium and called us up a week later and was all excited that it was a species. So we had already collected seeds off of those dried, shriveled up plants, and of course, just like we're talking about with Ruellia, everyone germinated. And so we got lots of them in cultivation. They're actually kind of weedy in cultivation. So again, one of those things, how is it not more common in the wild? But I think just those stigmas can just make us overlook some of these rare relatives of just otherwise common genera. This poor endemic pea plant that kind of looks like kudzu or something that you just would be ripping out of your yard as opposed to growing it. I think it's actually a pretty beautiful vine. Flowers late in the season. Where you find it, there's just like a few individuals here and there, and that's it. And in southern Edwards Plateau, and growing with it, it seems like every site that has that phaseolus also has this Nabilis carrii, named after Bill Carr, a well-known botanist. Many of you probably know him. But this is just another plant that just kind of blends in, and came up in your garden, you probably weeded out because it doesn't look like much. I mean, the flowers are beautiful, but when you're out in the woods and it's not as showy as it appears in the photo here, it just kind of it's hard to differentiate from all the dried leaf litter. It really is a beautiful plant. San Antonio Botanica, it's growing. When we found these, me and Michael Eason, we collected seeds off of this and got a bunch of seedlings going down both of our places. Thistles, I think, again, just tend to be considered a weed, whether they're native or non-native. But looks like this photo needs to be rotated, but not really the case. This species grows out of cliffs. It's only grows on cliffs, and it just sends these flower spikes out horizontally. It's the strangest thing when I first encountered this. Really beautiful flowers, hummingbird pollinated, and yeah, once you start kind of losing your hatred for thistles, I mean, it's really a beautiful plant. Basically, its range, and again, within that range, only limited to vertical cliffs. Asclepias prostrata, this is one from South Texas. This, on the other hand, people like. But if you take away those milkweed flowers, I guarantee you everybody would just overlook this plant, regardless how rare it was. Milkweed, obviously, are popular right now, save the monarchs, all that stuff, but why just monarchs? Why not all the other butterflies? Yeah, it's great that that's caught on, but it should be about everything else too. But it's good that milkweeds are getting some attention. We can chip away on them genus by genus here. These are the ones I'm growing at Bartlett. They're doing wonderfully. These are all from San Antonio's seed collections, Michael Eason. So I prepared these crevice gardens for them, just figuring that they're going to want really sharp drainage. So basically crevice gardening, if you don't know, is basically the orientation of these rock slabs vertically so you can have a tighter root zone filled with fast draining mix to be able to just shed water off the root zones. And they're very deep rooted, so we didn't know how well they were going to do in our climate either. So I made sure that they had enough room to basically extend the roots even deeper. I'm sorry? It looks like it's a very thick, basically stem that goes at least that far down before it starts branching out, and it'll make these nodules along it also. That we don't know yet if those actually will produce plantlets or not. I know. Yeah, Michael broke some off and sets them up just to see if they're. Yeah. But you never see them forming colonies in the wild too much. So yeah, I don't know. It's a fascinating plant. The only milkweed that just, or at least in our area, that creeps along the ground. There's a couple out west too, western states. Echinacea paradoxa neglecta. This is kind of a mystery. You can see the weird range there. There's actually two varieties of Echinacea paradoxa. There's variety neglecta and there's variety paradoxa, the yellow one here. How these are being considered two different species, I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch to me. There is someone working on that now, doing molecular work on this, but very curious what they're going to find. I think they're totally different. But then separating this from Echinacea atrorubens is also rather difficult. So we have these little clusters down here in southeastern Texas and those up in southern Oklahoma. Those are all the ones that are considered this variety neglecta. And then the paradoxa are the ones up in Arkansas and Missouri. We don't get the yellow ones here. But basically the difference when you get down to keying them out, it's down to little hairs on the seeds and also the rays, basically what a lot of people call petals on these Asteraceae flowers here. The rays, basically the length of them. So the longer ones, so the ones that are over 30, 35 centimeters or millimeters, I'm sorry, are supposedly neglecta, and the shorter ones are atrorubens. But I found sites where you get everything mixed into a single population. So whether we've got two things that are mixing or one thing that's just highly variable, that's one of the many questions to figure out here. So there's atrorubens on the left and maybe the Paradoxa neglecta on the right there. That particular one on the right was like right at the boundary line between the measurements. So who knows? And I've looked at the seeds too on these, and I see so much variation in that. I don't think people have looked at enough samples to really say that they're consistently like this or like this. So more work needs to be done, and until then, I think a lot of people just see the what get called the Paradoxa neglecta and just think they're the atrorubens, since that's a little bit more common down there, even though their prairie remnant habitat is going away. From South Texas, ambrosia. Do you guys know that genus?
Unfortunately.
Ragweed. So this is a rare ragweed, so it needs a little bit of love, but has a bad name. But it doesn't look like the ragweed that has most people sneezing. It's a very localized plant. You can see it's just a couple counties in southern coastal Texas. But as soon as I show it to people in the garden all the time when I'm doing tours, I made sure to plant one up along our main tour route through the Arboretum, and I always point out to them to try to get them to guess what it is. As soon as I hear ragweed, I'm like, yeah, just try and tell them how rare it is and what a cool thing it is. And they could not care less. I'm sure to have milkweed flowers, everybody would love it, but it's just automatically bad if it's a ragweed. Desmodium too. You guys haven't in this part of the state where you get little things, the seed pods that stick all over you when you walk through them. This is one of those genera that has all those sticky pods, but this is a rare one. So a lot of people don't like the genus just because they peeled enough seeds off their clothes. But this one only lives down around San Antonio there. But, it's turning into a beautiful plant. It has really nice orange new growth on it. Ours flowered for the first time this past fall. Photos I've seen, it has much larger inflorescences with multiple flowers on them when it gets going. But this is like the favorite thing our deer love in our garden here. They just were mowing this down constantly before I finally put a cage around it. Yuccas. I love yuccas. And I know a lot of people like yuccas. They're a common landscape plant, but I think people kind of gloss over them. A yucca is a yucca, and or they're just those things that stab you in the eye when you're gardening. But this particular one here is a new species, only a couple little populations southwest of Houston along the coast there, and Karen Clary, who used to retired from Ladybird Johnson Wildflower Center, was the one who named this and was really passionate about this species here. But she told me that she just couldn't really get anybody interested in it, and was really glad I was excited about it. Hoping this year to do pollinations on this, because this is one of those weird plants that it flowers every year in the wild, but there's never been any seed set. So it's thought that maybe the moth that pollinates these is not here anymore, where these things are growing, because yuccas are very specific to the type of moth that can pollinate them. And so she described the species just based on all the other available information that there is here that makes it quite different from all other yuccas, but we still have no clue what the fruits look like. So yeah, we're hoping to, they tried doing hand pollination studies when they started, but after I talked to them after the fact, I've done all the trial and error through yucca hand pollinations, putting on my moss suit, and finally got it to work. So we're going to try again, just with the techniques that worked for me this year. And then we have this other thing in East Texas that was named a long time ago Yucca freemanii, but it's been just unceremoniously lumped in with the common Yucca louisianensis, which is pretty common throughout the eastern third of Texas. And this site, they're growing side by side. The Yucca louisianensis has kind of like a silver margin on the leaves, whereas the freemanii, they're just solid green and a much darker green too. And the inflorescence structure is a lot different as well. I talked to Karen Clary about these too. She agrees they're different, but just can't get to everything. Hopefully someone will unravel these at some point and do some molecular work. But until then, we're growing it. It's different enough that, and not common enough that we're just getting it into cultivation. One of our native gooseberries, Ribes curvatum, what they call a granite gooseberry because it grows on granite in one of the populations in the eastern part of its range. You can see it's a weird range. It skips Mississippi and it's in northern Georgia, Alabama, and eastern Tennessee, and then pops up again in Arkansas and East Texas and western Louisiana. But again, don't let all those records in East Texas fool you. It's not common at all. It can be where you find at some of the sites, but I don't know really what makes it rare. I mean, it's.
Is there granite in East Texas?
No, that's what I was saying. It's only growing on granite in one of the populations in northern Georgia. So it just kind of earned its name from there. But in East Texas, I still haven't understood what site preference is at once because I've seen it on Weechel's Formation limestone in East Texas. I've seen it on very well-drained sandy scrub in Gus Engling Wildlife Management Area. And I've seen it in all sorts of places in between. Catahoula Sandstone Barren down in Walker County. It just, assuming these are all the same thing, who knows, or we may have other cryptic species in this mix here, but it's one of those things that's, it's a very scraggly plant. It just forms like a big thicket. It'll have these arching stems that'll root where it touches the ground and just keep arching outwards, and then other things grow up through it, so it's not very attractive. It is a gooseberry, and it produces these edible fruit that are actually really good, but it has these nice flowers on them, but it doesn't seem like there's, even though they're producing fruit, there doesn't seem to be much seedling recruitment at some of these sites. There's for those of you that know Greg Grant in East Texas, he's got a population on his property, and he just has these old specimens that are just basically just static. They're just sitting there and never see any, even though they produce fruits, they never produce any seedlings. And so we don't know what it wants. It does great in cultivation, but.
So what I hear in common in all those habitats you mentioned is fast drainage.
Yep. But I mean, there's so many fast draining sites out there. I don't know why.
Maybe that's its main requirement.
Yeah, it's definitely found on a variety of soil chemistries and everything, but still, it's just one of those things that tends to be rare for some reason. And I really just brought you here just to lecture you about Crataegus. It's become my favorite genus that everybody hates. I mean, they're beautiful when they flower and they're in fruit, but all the seasons in between, everybody hates them. They do get good fall color, at least some of them. This is Crataegus brachyacantha from East Texas, which is the only native U.S. species that gets blue fruit. Most of them have red to orange to yellow fruit, but this is a really distinctive one. It's called the blueberry hawthorn. Doesn't taste very good, but it's edible at the very least. But I've really got into them, and there's this one here at the bottom that has these nice long thorns. This particular one is extinct in the wild. The entire genus Crataegus is just full of conservation priorities, but there's not enough information to really solidly say that this is a species or that species. A lot of them look very similar. There's different viewpoints in terms of lumping a bunch of things that are close enough together versus splitting them out and calling them different species, and therefore having some of those maybe of very local conservation concern. And
Where
so
were these native to?
the world, they were basically the northern hemisphere. They were all through North America, through Eurasia. We have many species here, including in the Dallas area, including some really unusual ones. Crataegus tracei, the one up there that's got thorns on top of thorns. If you look closely at there, that's from Central and West Texas. That's a more common one now. But this one that's extinct in the wild here used to grow up in Illinois, and it was that particular seedling was originally collected by a long time ago by Arnold Arboretum folks up in Massachusetts, and they got some growing. They shared a cutting with Morton Arboretum. Arnold Arboretum's original plant died, so Morton Arboretum is the only one that has this plant in existence because nobody's ever seen it again. And so now we're just, we meaning the three of us that like this, like Crataegus conservation, are grafting this and trying to share it around to any botanic gardens that want to take an interest in it, and most of them refuse it, unfortunately. So this is one of those things that's kind of like Franklinia or some of these other enigmatic plants that have become extinct in the wild, but only exist because someone brought them into cultivation. A lot of people don't like Crataegus because they get cedar apple rust as well as a couple other rust fungi that affect the rose family. But and that thing in the center there, I mean, who wouldn't want to grow that? Isn't that beautiful? That's our rare Crataegus nana-nixonii. You can see the county records. It's endemic to a couple sites in East Texas and nowhere else in the world. But yeah, that's what it looks like half the time. It just grows in these sandy woods that get burned every so often, hopefully. And so they'll just get burned back to the ground and just keep resprouting into a little multiple stemmed scrubby thing. But really beautiful leaves. This is when one was flushing out, it gets those kind of orange tones in it. We have some other debatable species. This one, Crataegus vivernifolia from lower Brazos Valley and wrapping around into South Texas a little bit. This is, if you know, Crataegus mollis, which is found around here. Some people tend to lump this one in with that one. This one tends to have just really huge leaves about that big around. It's hard to tell from the photos. And then the golden colored fruit. But what was weird is where I found that species, basically all these other things in the Crataegus mollis group were growing literally side by side with it. And so basically all these four plants here, which were very difficult. I mean, you can see a little bit of variation in the leaves, but don't really go by that because each leaf is different on these plants here. That's another problem. I showed my herbarium specimens, and we extracted fruit and counted the seeds per fruit because sometimes that's diagnostic. And I showed it to Ron Lance, who's basically one of the experts on this genus here. One of the few people crazy enough to really spent a good portion of his life trying to figure these things out, and he kind of threw up his arms and told me to revisit them again in spring and count stamens on the flowers, and maybe that'll give us a little bit more information. But whether we know what they are or not, we're still collecting them. We're going to grow them, growing these things side by side. We're going to basically hopefully get some more information and see some differences that we can then have under our belt when we finally can do some molecular work and hopefully be able to sort these things out, or find out that they're all the same thing and it's just variable, like I was talking about. A lot to be done. Crataegus dallasiana, obviously from the name, it's from here, or maybe was from here, and maybe no longer. I don't know. The last known living individual that anybody knew of, I went and visited this past fall, hoping to get some seeds because it looked good last time someone looked at it, and it was totally dead. So this is down in Waxahachie, right along I-35 there. You can see the interstate down there. It's along one of the frontage roads. And yeah, it was just probably been dead for a couple of years. Little skeleton. There was one fairly recent, I think it was from the year 2000, of a non-identified Crataegus. It was collected up along on the Oklahoma side of the Red River, just northwest of here. That Ron Lance, the guy I mentioned earlier, he had, when he saw that herbarium specimen, he was like, this is Crataegus dallasiana. So there was a specimen up there. So went looking for it and had a really good description of where it was, just below a bridge and everything, but could not find it. Still want to, that was in fall though, but want to revisit in spring and maybe something will stick out a little bit more. But otherwise, there could be more on some private land from where the original herbarium specimens came from back in the late 90s. I'm sorry, early 90s. But I'm hoping to look into land access just to be able to explore more. But as of right now, we know no living specimens of this species here. So it's definitely something I've been wanting to prioritize, and been talking with the folks at Britt and working on this together. So hopefully we can discover some more individuals, but hopefully you all will be enlightened and want to learn how to do some Crataegus identification and maybe find some on your own, since you're in their neck of the woods. One that Brooke at Britt brought to my attention was this really nice patch of Crataegus viridis ready glabroscula, which is kind of the main center of distribution for this variety of Crataegus viridis, is right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Crataegus viridis in itself, if you go into the Bonat map, it's just basically including everything that gets called Crataegus viridis. It doesn't have them split down into varieties, but basically all the stuff that you see up in this area here is this variety glabroscula, which normally is a very hairy leaf species, but all the ones around here have no hairs on their leaves. So that's what makes it a little bit different from everywhere else. And so being that it is fairly localized, I mean, they're not too rare here, but things do get rare. So as we're collecting these things, we're getting seed banked. And I'm dropping off seeds to Kay here to take to Britt. This trip here, we collected seeds in early December, and I'm finally passing them off here tonight. So Kay was able to make it because I wasn't going to be able to make it to Britt to deliver them. So yeah, it's good to be able to get some of this material seed banked, and we have a small portion of that we kept apart, but to be able to grow out as well. So yeah, you can tell I'm Crataegus crazy here. This was basically all my Texas collections from this past December. That was like 4 or 5 days at the most total. It was basically East Texas, South Texas, Central Texas, and all the way up to Oklahoma border in this neck of the woods here.
Are these on the plant or on the ground?
Both. I was kind of late in doing my collections this year, so some species will drop their fruit earlier, but they'll remain on the ground a long time. For some reason, the wildlife does not favor Crataegus fruits until all the other good stuff is gone. So they tend to sit really late in the winter time, and they won't really rot either. They'll just be big red or yellow or orange mass of fruits underneath the tree, and they stay fresh. So yeah, I would have preferred to come earlier in the year and pick them off the tree, nice and fresh, and be able to have more leaves on them too, because everything was mostly defoliated at that time. So there were some things I couldn't really get very good herbarium specimens to accompany these, but I'm going to be revisiting almost all of these this year just to be able to see them in flower as well and get herbarium specimens from that time of the year too. Because again, a lot of these things you can only tell by counting their stamens. Or just looking at some of their other minute floral features. If we really know what we're looking at. Again, we need much more information beyond just the morphology with these guys. But it's a genus that is really, it's talking with folks at NatureServe. I mean, this has been one of their highest priorities to get someone to be looking at in terms of the tree species, woody plant species in North America, because just nobody's doing this. So.
And they're all thorn?
I'm sorry?
They're all thorn?
Yeah, for the most part. There's some that are less thorny than others, but so are roses. People like those. So are cacti. People like those. Well, some people like those. But yeah, hope to kind of opened your eyes a little bit more. I'm sure most of you all kind of appreciate these plants already, but A lot of the general public just doesn't. They just tend to gloss over these things, and I'm sure you've heard news stories where the general public is just kind of, there's a small group of people trying to save some land from preservation over like some snail or some little invertebrate that people can't understand what the point of that is. And I mean, it's the same thing with these plants here too. I mean, I think that some of these, if one of those plants that was in my slide was the only thing that was catching someone's attention for preserving a tract of land, I mean, that's worth it.
Can you talk about how these surveys are done? Like, are you out surveying for fun, or is somebody's funding your, is your?
Well, work funds me now.
So, like, I know Jeff Quayle does a lot of surveys, and how does the information get to BONAP and?
Yeah, BONAP is all based off of herbarium records, so it has to be submitted to an herbarium, and there's a lot of updating that needs to go on. So everything that you see in BONAP, all those records there aren't always necessarily reflecting the most current records. I mean, herbariums unfortunately are always understaffed and always behind in processing their specimens, and then that's going to get transferred over to BONAP at some point. And it's an arduous process, so it's not always an accurate reflection down to the moment. But yeah, and I mean, surveys in general, I mean, go back to answer your question. I mean, whether or not I'm getting paid, I'm doing it. It's just my passion. I was doing it before. I was working for a garden that is fortunately very much supporting what I do here. They hired me to be me, and I basically can do whatever I want, which is nice. And
So there's a lot of people like you doing all these
Exactly.
surveys. I love it.
Yep, there's a lot of folks in this audience here that I'm finally glad to meet for the first time or catching up with again.
You mentioned several places you're working with, the Wildflower Center. Are you working at all with Texas Discovery Garden?
I did. I've lost connection with them. When Roger Sanderson was there, of course, he was a passionate nerd as well, so we were always exchanging material. But yeah, need to get in touch with the new folks there.
Okay, Roseanne is the one to talk to, really. She's a volunteer. She's not the horticulturist, but she's the one that really runs the place.
Yeah, and I was always very impressed with just all the really unusual plants that they propagate there and distribute. So it's a good outlet for a lot of things you just can't find in the native nurseries, but hopefully will at some point here.
Okay, well, I hope you connect with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I work with, and a lot of people I still need to be getting in touch with. Problem is, I'd rather be out looking at plants rather than doing all the connections, but that needs to happen too.
So after you can put the top 60 in your yard that you can get at plant sales and stuff, how does someone, if they want to help preserve stuff for their ecosystem, how do you go about finding about the odd little guys that need a home?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those problems right now. There's not enough native nurseries that are really selling enough diversity. I mean, there are more native nurseries popping up that are kind of expanding on their product lines beyond just the stuff that is propagated on the wholesale scale. But yeah, it's a problem just because there's all the ethics involved. There's a lot of things that are illegal collected, and there are nurseries out there that do collect illegally, unfortunately. Some of them feel like this is the only way to get it in cultivation, but like a lot of things we're collecting in national parks, we can't, that remains federal property. We can't then get that in the nursery, so that stuff only can be locked up with botanical institutions that basically sign off that they're not going to share it any further, which I think is not good. But there's just so much politics around it. I mean, I can just go on with all these different examples in terms of why we can't just bring all this diversity into the native plant horticulture world. But we're slowly making changes. Like with the native plant rescues, I know a lot of that's can't be sold initially, but some of those derivatives of it downstream can. So again, hopefully these paths will be able to result in more diversity in the future. But yeah, it is kind of a challenge to navigate all this stuff. If you have access to private land and you have permission from the landowners, I mean, I would say you're free to do what you want. Where a lot of my good finds come from is just access to some of these ranches that just no botanists have ever been on. Anything else?
There's a question on Zoom from Deanna, and she was wondering, is there a list or a site that shows historically native plants previously in the area but are now gone or potentially extirpated per ecoregion or county?
Know of any real concise?
You'd have to do herbarium searches.
Yeah,
and then
you'd have to go
work
by
backwards.
species by species and look them up. I don't think there really is a maybe that coming to mind. Just a good source to direct someone to.
Speaking of herbariums, what are your thoughts on Duke's herbarium and what impact do you think that will have to conservation, especially in the southeast?
Yeah, so.
And here's a question.
So those that don't know, Duke University, their herbarium is basically in limbo right now. The administration at the university wants to basically get rid of it. And they are saying they don't have enough funds to hire enough people to be able to curate it properly, which is not the case. They have a ton of money there. This has happened before. I mean, those of you that have been around here and have been kind of involved with the folks at Britt, they absorbed University of Louisiana, Lafayette, I think it was, or no, Monroe. Their herbarium when basically that university just wanted to get rid of it to expand their sports department, because of course that brings in more money for the university. Fortunately, Britt had the capabilities with their then new building to be able to absorb it, but usually herbariums do not have space. They're usually bursting at the seams and always in need of more space because they get very little support and that sort of thing. Even though this hit the news publicly fairly recently, it's been known for at least a year. And there are some people kind of trying to work out deals to be able to rescue it or to be able to partner with Duke and come to a compromise here. Hopefully something will work out, but there is a petition going around on change.org that y'all can sign if you want to.
We have
make
the
your
QR
voices
code
heard.
for it.
You can also, I think they also have the contacts for whoever the pertinent people are at the university to, if you want to send them a letter to just show your support for the reasons for keeping an herbarium. Some people just view herbarium as just a bunch of dried plants and don't understand the purpose of it. And it's really critical for our knowledge of just being able to do any form of botanical science. You need these collections of all these specimens for over time. A lot of them quite historic. I think I explained what was going on, but I think you had a question. I'm sorry.
What role, if it does indeed close, what impact will that have on conservation, specific plant conservation? And you don't have to speak to the mycology part, I guess, but plant conservation in the southeast.
Well, I mean, it's not going to be thrown away. I don't think anybody's going to let that happen. At worst, it will be split up among a lot of different herbaria. Whoever can take whatever. And it's not just plants, it's also fungi and I think lichens and mosses and things like that. So I know there's already been some discussions. The mosses going to Missouri Botanic Gardens. Yeah, other people have kind of agreed to take certain portions that would be reflective of their collection strengths in terms of certain plant families or regional focuses. So I doubt it's ever just going to go in the trash or it'll still be out there and available, but having it all together in one spot is obviously much more beneficial than everybody having to scramble and
Or the,
try to find homes for it.
a collection getting pieces lost in transportation and.
It was a pretty monumental task from all the things I heard moving University of Louisiana's collection here to Britt, just all the climate-controlled refrigerated trucks that they needed to keep everything in, and just being able to process everything. It's pretty amazing they were able to pull that off. Yeah. Basically, the rumor is with that collection, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, they're actually building a very large herbarium right now and botanical resources center there. And they will have the capability in a few years, but they don't right now. So they're looking at basically trying to, if worse comes to worse, find a way to temporarily store it somewhere where they can have all the proper climate controls and everything. So it's one of the more optimistic approaches that's occurring right now, but they're still trying to talk to the university as well, to try to keep it there. Also,
So how many pieces are in the collection?
like 825,000 specimens.
Yeah, it was 800,000. It's the second largest private university-owned herbarium collection in the U.S.
I'm sorry,
Oh, I was just repeating, 25,000.
825,000.
8 what?
Yeah.
825,000.
Well, that's a little different.
Yeah. Almost 1 million specimens. Have any other questions?
Thank you.
Oh, no, you can draw, Louise. No, you're drawing.
I'm
No.
hanging out.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, all right. So we've got three
Well, we
names.
have 3 milkweeds, 1 bushel, and 3 members. And if people have not filled out, okay.
Thank you all online for joining us. Thank you. Should we keep them on? All right, there's 3. Who wants to pull a name?
Jennifer, is it, did I